So we have another story about an AWS breach, not S3 this time, but stolen API keys.
So Michael, you're going to tell us about an incident where an API key was stolen and then abused.
Yeah, so a company, Imperva, relatively well-known cyber vendor. Usually they have a large web application firewall product line that's pretty popular. And yeah, they recently disclosed that they had a cloud security breach where they did have some customer data exposure. So that includes email addresses, some hashed and salted passwords, and even customer API keys, and interestingly enough, TLS keys, as part of this database snapshot that got exfiltrated. So it's affected customers prior to September 15th, 2017. And we'll talk a little about kind of the database snapshot, but there's a really detailed post-mortem that Imperva has out on their website, which talks a lot about some of the detailed background and things they've done since to keep this from happening again. But they were tipped just this past August 2019, but the activity tracks back to actually October 2018. So they kind of claim they had a different security posture, kind of back about a year ago. But yeah, the attackers were able to retrieve an AWS API key from an internet exposed EC2 instance that they had. And then using that API key and the permissions associated with it, the attacker was able to exfiltrate a snapshot from AWS RDS, which is a relational database service, which is like the PaaS database as a service offering in AWS. And again, they were able to exfiltrate that with customer data. And through their investigation, they were able to track back that particular snapshot to September 2017. So they kind of know exactly what was taken. But they do claim since then they've tightened their security controls. They do more scanning of their public cloud environments, and then now all their compute resources are behind their VPN, so none are directly internet exposed. But yeah, interesting story. They do indicate, though, that they haven't had any activity around abuse of the customer accounts themselves. So that potentially means it may be not a hacker, but a security researcher. There's not a lot of detail on exactly how they were tipped off and maybe who was behind this, but the fact that they haven't seen any activity maybe suggested it was more of a researcher.
So it was going on for a whole year or so before it was discovered and kind of stopped?
Yeah, so they actually, again, they were kind of tipped to this activity. So they actually didn't find it themselves. Someone had come along with, I think, said, here, look at this data we have. I think they were requesting a bug bounty maybe. So yeah, they actually hadn't found it themselves, and someone else had kind of tipped them to this activity. And when they went back and looked through a lot of the log data that they were consuming, they were able to identify kind of what the root cause was.
And it sounded like they took some very responsible steps at that point to notify and to make sure they were monitoring so that none of the information that was leaked was being used to carry out, further malicious activity. That's
right. Yeah. So they disclosed it. They released, again, they have a really detailed post-mortem that they went through to investigate, to detail everything that happened. They, notified customers. They have some statistics in their report where customers, rotated keys, changed passwords. So again, they notified customers immediately, and through their monitoring, they haven't identified that there was actually any malicious activity that was used.
So I guess protect your keys is the big takeaway, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw, there was a big, and we still see them every now and then, this big rash of S3 buckets, right, public facing, and then AWS came along and added some more controls, which made it very difficult and explicit for you to make an S3 bucket public. And then lately we've seen some more stories around these API keys. So either they get exposed, either you check them into like code control, like GitHub. In this case, there's not a lot of detail, but this server may have been compromised, and there may have been keys laying around in config files, and then the whole AWS EC2 metadata service where an EC2 instance gets this like temporary role and credential that you can access. So a lot of stories we're seeing now around API key exposure, and we'll see kind of if it slows down, if there's any changes, or if there's any changes that the different cloud service providers can take to help restrict that access more. But yeah, we're seeing some of these stories pop up.
I mean, I think the lesson is make sure that your keys aren't exposed. Nobody can get their hands on them. the victim in this case did a good job of finding out from the logs what had been accessed, whose information that was, and then monitoring, notifying, all the things you do as part of your response plan. You know, you're activating it, it's a big deal, making sure everybody knows what happened, and then making sure that the information that was exposed isn't being used to carry out malicious activities right now.